Hello, everyone. I am Oath Alliance here, in charge of the Oathcast, and with me I have Shill from Spells Fired and Low Ping from Low Ping.
How's it going?
Hi, how are you?
So, just to start off, I kind of just want to ask you guys, one at a time, why are you guys involved in Gamergate? Like, what do you see here, and what do you find important? So, I guess I'll start with you, Low.
Well, I initially came in upon being told about the victimization of a certain group at the hands of another certain group, and it really just smacked of overall injustice and duplicity, and just can't stand for that kind of thing. So that's basically why I'm here, just trying to promote, all of everything that entails, ethics and just overall, just not being a jerk to the world type of thing is why I'm here. So, yeah, that's pretty much everything I'm about.
And how about you, Shill?
Well, I think I speak for all gamers, and I said this is a reckoning that was in the works for a while now. I mean, how long has sites like IGN and Mountain Dew and Dorito chips been the butt end of every inside gamer click joke? Um, Really, it's just people, gaming as a whole, is fed up with the bullshit, and I wouldn't be doing my part if I just stayed quiet. And then I was here since the beginning, since it was a conspiracy theory. Back when Aaron was still very much a part of the Gamergate movement, even though it wasn't called Gamergate at the time. And I joined up in the IRC Burgers and Fries, and I followed the threads on V and Poll, and eventually I found a group of like-minded people who wanted to build a website. So I took part in that team, and that was months ago, and now it's me, Arif, which is our head coder. I have Scanner Bro, which is our video guy. He's like my cameraman, honestly, because I suck with technology. And then we have Temet, who also does coding for us. And basically, we're doing for our part to create a better website that's fueled by the community. And we want Gamergate to succeed. I mean, we're for the gamers because we're gamers after all. At the end of the day, a lot of these companies that are journalistic sites have just they've taken it for granted. We're no longer the audience; they're just the people, or we're just the people that they shove whatever the hell they want to down our throats.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess we should just I'm planning. I don't have like this giant script or anything I'm reading off of, so I'm just going to sort of touch on things. And if you guys have any topics you want to bring up, feel free to do so. Um, but I do just want to start off by sort of giving this disclaimer for myself because I can't speak for everyone. But I know that there's been a lot of things going on recently, and still we're getting lambasted with we're a bunch of harassers and all that. So since we're just starting off, I do want to stress, as always, we do not condone any sort of harassment, threats, or doxing. I think both of you guys probably agree with me on that.
No way. I mean, come on. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, with all of that, I also just want to say to everyone who's going to be watching this, both now as it's live and later when it's on YouTube, to just go ahead and be civil and be safe. Don't get angry. Actually, I've been spending the last few days sort of playing the Twitter hashtag police at times, engaging with people on both sides. I've gotten to talk to a few people who are pretty adamantly against us and go ahead and try to figure out, things that they were saying. Oh, I was being harassed by this person and this other person. I had to look into it and ask people to calm it down a little bit and things like that. And so far, the reaction's been pretty good. I've only had one person who wasn't even attached to like Gamergate just pretty much cuss at me because I was like, "Hey, can you calm it down a little bit?" So
And he was on the Gamergate side, or not even involved in general.
he didn't use the hashtag. When I asked him, he was like, "I'm not even with you guys." It's like, why are you arguing then?
Because this is the internet, all right? The internet is the official wrestling ring of all arguments. It doesn't matter if you're part of the fight or not. You can come out there with a steel chair and get involved.
Yeah, it was just. But anyways, in general, I've had a few interactions with some not very nice uh anti-Gamergate people. One of them I had this very lovely conversation with. Is he started off by saying "fuck you" at the end of his first tweet, and by the end, I was like, "Well, thank you for this civil conversation because pretty much we agreed to disagree, or at least that's where I was at." And he said, "Yes, it's been a very civil conversation. Fuck you." It's like, oh, he's so nice.
Maybe use Dante, the demon killer.
I don't know, but anyways, but I just enjoy sort of driving them crazy because in general, I'm a very kind of laid back person in the sense that I don't get riled up really easily. And even when I do, I can, especially on the internet, I can usually remain pretty darn civil. So just causing them to, it just drives them nuts. I can, you just watch what they say and it just drives them nuts when they're mad at you and all you can do is just do this passive aggressive nice thing where you're slightly being sarcastic at times, but most of the time just speaking in this very civil tone with them. They just lose it.
Yeah. What do you think, Loping? Do you think that's the
Uh,
proper way to engage the enemy forces?
yeah, well, I mean, one, you really don't have to refer to them as enemies. These people are essentially what we have to understand is, the ones we're opposite of right now, the ones we're opposing, the ones we're critical of. I mean, they're still essentially, our brethren, and when this is all over, we will be establishing, reestablishing commerce with them if they can, in fact, reform their ways. So I don't know if we want to stress that, opposing forces thing a little too much. That being said, yes, kill them with kindness. That's really one of the best ways to approach this. I mean, if you're not presenting yourself as fulfilling this narrative of what you're supposed to be according to them and everyone else who shares that narrative, it's going to be pretty frustrating for them. I mean, you're not the demons that they're setting you out to be. You're setting doubts in their mind. You're pretty much casting all sorts of, positive imagery over a group that's supposed to be all about negativity, and it's just going to be shattering their worldview, and usually people don't like when that happens. So yes, this is normally what kind of reaction you should expect from people who have a sort of preconception about our group. Yeah.
Yep, and I kind of wish one thing I did do recently, like a few days ago, is I sort of compiled a list of Twitter accounts I found that kind of were either really going off on Gamergate or just people being trolls, and I compiled a sort of a bolo list video of just like people don't talk to these people because they probably won't listen to you. And I think in general, probably Gamergate, the hashtag in general, should be aware that there are certain people out there who just don't even want to engage with you, and they just want to use whatever you give them as ammunition to keep on attacking us. And
Hmm.
I think there's sort of three different people in the entirety of this. We've got people who are for Gamergate. Well, actually, probably four people, but you've got people who are for Gamergate, people who don't know anything about this and are sort of in the middle, kind of in a they don't know what's going on. They just sort of drift around. You've got people who are adamantly against Gamergate and actually want to destroy us and stuff, and those are who I'd see as more of our quote unquote enemies because they don't give a rip what we're fighting for. They just want us gone. And then there's the people who've been co-opted by the narrative that the anti-Gamergaters have been giving, and they don't actually know who we are. They just know what they've been told, and they've been sort of hit by the propaganda machine.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull a figure out my butt here, and I'm just gonna say something to like, I'm gonna assume about 40% of the people we engage that are adamantly opposed to us are just woefully misinformed about who we are and what we do. and it can be disheartening, but it's kind of incentive to actually do engage some people. I mean, I'll admit for this, a good number of people out there, when you do engage, someone who's way off to that side of the field, you will be shouting at a brick wall, essentially. And, you're not going to get a whole lot done. But on the off chance that you're going to be speaking to someone who's just, majorly misinformed, yeah, you might be, chipping away at that shield a little bit. So it's always worth at least, talking to somebody. I mean,
Yeah.
that's worst that can happen is that they block you and just don't agree with you, and then. But as long as you keep it civil, keep it safe, keep it neutral tone and not very hostile. Even the little passive aggressive things that I'm sure we'd just love to throw out there. Try and resist that because really it's more trouble than it's
Yeah,
worth.
passive aggressiveness is definitely a douchebag maneuver. And it's very popular in this day and age.
Yep. Um, yeah, with all I've been seeing, that's really been, and I do see that we're starting to get some people, um, moving over because it's getting harder and harder for the narrative to go against us. Uh, it's getting harder for them to contain us as a group of misogynistic,
Why contain
racist
it?
people. They're they're trying to keep us in that sort of box. These are all misogynistic, women hating, you know, white, cisgendered, heterosexual males who sit in their parents' basement and play video games, and they're all like teenagers, and it's really getting hard for them to keep us in that box they've put up as these are unreasonable people, and it's really getting hard for them to keep that narrative going, that spinning.
Yeah,
Think
I
of it
mean,
this way
especially
too. Like they've already not to get step on you here, dude, but they've already assigned us as something awful. I mean, we're harassers, we're misogynists, we're already the bottom of the barrel according to them. And as far as PR, goes, there's nowhere to go but up. So, everything that we can do to show that we're opposite of what they're saying, it's gonna help. I mean, unless somebody comes in here full blown, uh, wrecking everybody's butts, just being awful people in general, which I honestly don't see from anybody in our camp, then you know there's not really a whole lot more that they can do to hurt us. We're already scum of the boots according to them, so it's all uphill from now. So that's pretty much what I think about that as far as PR goes.
Anything you want to add, Joe?
um, I think being able to convert other people to our side is all good and fun, but at the end of the day, it is against the journalistic press outlets representing video games. And that's a battle that you really don't need to take to Twitter or Facebook or any of these sites, even image boards and the such. I mean, all you need to really do is email the advertisers, and that's working. I mean, we've seen Intel pull out. We've seen that one university also pull ads from Gamasutra. It's a strategy that's working, and when universities and a major company like Intel are making these moves, you better believe that there's other companies that are going to look to follow their moves, because at the end of the day, Intel is a competitor for someone, and Intel is a successful business, and businesses are going to want to try and emulate that.
Yeah. Yep. And but I'm not. Looking back at this, looking back because I wasn't here when it started, but I have had a time to look back because I wasn't involved in the entire very first wave of all of this when everything broke. Um, but I think that if all of these other websites like Gamasutra, Gotaku, and Polygon, and all those guys that ran those "Gamers Are Dead" articles, I think they could have at least not had. I think this would have never gotten so big if they had actually allowed an opposing view to be expressed. I mean, we saw in The Escapist that they allowed conversation to continue, and we haven't felt the need at all to push against them. I think it is really the fact that they stopped any discussion from happening, even healthy discussion. I mean, they could have just done what The Escapist did and just moderated anything that was really uncivil or anything like that. But I think that all of this really came from the fact that we just didn't have a voice when someone pretty much lambasted all of the gaming community as a whole.
There too, like at the same time, even taking away the whole, marginalizing voices thing, having these 12 over a dozen articles come out, I honestly I'm trying to wrap my head around just, you know, what did they expect to happen? Like honestly, just having this kind of just toxic bile spewed out there from their own platforms. Did they expect to just, have these people get a change of heart, shame them into obscurity or something like that? Because if that's the kind of planning that they have for these sort of narratives, then, they need to get a new general or something, because obviously it didn't work.
Yeah, I echo with what you were saying, Oath, about how if they had just prevented censorship and allowed people to talk about it, it wouldn't have become such a big deal. But there's definitely a lot of other wrong moves made that let it spin out of control into the movement that it is today. One of which Loping touched on, which is the mass messages that they published declaring that gamers are dead. Need to also take into consideration that a lot of these sites were pushing articles that were very questionable to begin with, that involved pushing a certain political ideology, such as feminism, or that white people are evil. And I mean, already sites like IGN, which is ironic because IGN's one of the cleaner sites in all this mess. There's not much dirt to be found on them. When sites like IGN, and it's become a mainstay in journalism sites to begin with, just to run advertisers who are also video game developers or publishers, and then to review their products, and there's nobody bats an eye. It's not a conflict of interest or anything. Apparently, that's just how the business is done. So there wasn't a good reputation for these sites going into it to begin with. And with what Loping was saying, he was asking what they expected to happen when they released all these sites or released all these articles declaring gamers are dead. And honestly, what I believe they expected to happen was they thought that they could strong arm the movement out of existence. You need to keep in mind that these are the sites that thousands of gamers go to get their news, whether or not we like it. And if they can push a overall narrative or push a narrative across all these websites, they have a strong belief that they can just kind of bully us out. And it didn't work. Instead, it agitated us and made it worse for them. And they thought they were the big kids on the fucking playground, and turns out they aren't.
Yeah, and I think that the reason why they thought they could probably get away with it is, I mean, looking at the Gamergate political spectrum that has been tossed around a bit, the sort of across the board look at where everyone lands in the political area. Most people land in the leaning left, liberal or libertarian area, and I think that they probably thought. I mean, if you look at gamers in general, like honestly, gamers are sort of the millennial. For the most part, generally we're looked on as the millennials, so we're more willing. We tend towards the gay marriage is okay. For all of these different social justice ideas, I guess. As So they were probably hoping that most gamers would go, hey, you know what? I'm for this stuff, and I think this is correct, and we need to stop being the exclusive group. I'm using quotation marks here, uh, and just go with it. I think they're hoping to just sort of knock us all over in one big push.
Yeah, I think what happened here, Gamergate ended up being, as far as political spectrums go, what ended up happening was, rather than shaking up, I don't know what they were trying to do, but rather than doing what they were trying to do, what it ended up being was extreme far leftists pissing off a bunch of moderate leftists, while you have a few people who are on the far right just kind of pointing and laughing at the whole thing. So I mean, just that in general, I find a little funny. I mean, we get lambasted as right-wing extremists. Well, no, we're not. We're moderate leftists for the most part. Of course, we're going to look extreme if the people who are fighting against themselves are extremists. So I guess it kind of makes sense, but no, we're not. We're not what they think we are.
Yeah. And what it's funny. So in the whole, I'm actually going to be honest for a moment. I'm actually towards I'm one of the few guys, the few dozen guys, who lands on the towards the right-leaning libertarian area in all of this. I'm not incredibly far over, but I was one of the people who landed. So, and even though there's lots of people I disagree with, I mean, I can probably disagree with most of the people, and probably both of you, I could probably disagree with both of you on a lot of things very quickly. But it's just
Mm.
amazing how we've become sort of a melting pot, all connected through just the fact that we're tired of this. We're just
Oh,
tired.
I don't agree. I don't think it's a melting pot. I think it's a fruit salad.
Yeah. Well, whatever it is, keep going with your point.
Yeah, I
That
think
was
that
just me showing that we're not agreeing on everything.
yeah, and I think that really what it shows is that it is really what gamers have always been, is this fact that even though we're all different and we all have different ideas and we're all from different backgrounds, and some of us live in the West, some of us lived in the East, and all of these things, somehow we still can manage to find common ground, and instead of fighting each other over the things we disagree on, we've instead decided to put our differences aside and work together. And I think that that shows sort of a great thing about what video games have taught people over the years, because uh, I don't think you'd find this in any other like medium, whether it be theater or art or books or TV or movies. Is you'd find so many people just willing to work together, even though we all disagree in lots of different places.
Yeah, I think like what you see. I mean, when you ask, I did this little thing a while ago where I had people just email me what was basically it was basically two important questions. It was, who are you and why are you here? And then it was like five other questions asking industry specific stuff. And I got close to something like 600 emails at the end of the thing. And just reading across the board here, you're seeing people from a wide variety of things, and it kind of explains why it gives the impression that Gamergate has like differing objectives. It's because what you're seeing is like you have people who are coming from all places across the board, and they're actually coming into this for different reasons. Like they all didn't come in just on the infamous day when the dozen plus articles were published. So as a result, what you have here is people who are coming in for different reasons. They're seeing different goals. So what Gamergate ends up being, Gamergate, is not an ends, it's a means. But it's the means that we all have in common. It's, I want journalistic reform because, and it's the because that's personal to everybody. Like some people are because they see a consumer advocacy thing. Some people say the because they're seeing a political narrative being pushed, and they have some people saying it's because they see just overall corruption in the industry. But what they all have in common is, I want journalistic reform. That's what the common means is. So rather than the end result, which is just personal and different to everybody, what we have in common, this common shared not goal, but means, is journalistic reform. And that's really, really hard to understand because people are used to movements having, a clear defined objective. Well, it's like, it's hard to point down because, that objective is going to be different for everybody. So I find that's where a lot of the confusion comes in, because it's really hard to wrap your mind around a movement not having, an objective in the traditional sense.
Yeah, I think having all these different ideologies, politically speaking, joined together restores my faith in humanity a little bit. Personally, I fucking hate politics. I don't vote. I don't do any of that shit. And I think I speak for a lot of gamers when I say that if gaming is escapism, why would we want to inject something as toxic as politics into it? But it restores my faith in humanity because we're all able to come together and just say, all right, this is fucking bullshit. Let's set aside our differences and let's work on making our industry better.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it's kind of sad to see Sunday, which is when a lot of people were trying. Well, not a lot. A few people were really working hard to try rip Gamergate apart at the seams. Um, there were a few people attacking, uh, like Roguestar, or trying to say he's bad for our movement because he used military rhetoric, and people also trying to. I don't know why they were attacking him, honestly. Um, anyways, people were attacking him. People were attacking others. I know that one person in particular was attacking Nero, trying to ostracize him from our group. I just think that was an entirely ridiculous thing because, we're not here to fight about whether or not you think we should use military operation names or anything like this. That's not the point of Gamergate. And the entire point of Gamergate is that we all, at least at some point, um, somewhere along the ways, the means ultimately to whatever ends we all want is to have at least honest and fair journalism. And so, by just fighting over these things, these ideological differences, it was just kind of horrifying to watch because I wasn't sure if we were going to make it at all, but thankfully cooler heads prevailed and we actually managed to pull it out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because it's like what you said. Like necessarily, we don't have to agree with each other on all these things. I mean, that's what the end result you saw was people eventually coming to the conclusion was, yeah, that's a pretty crappy thing what they did, or well, yeah, no, I don't really like the nomenclature either, but we've still got this thing that we need to take care of, and we're going to stick together. So nuts to what you're saying.
yeah, and I'd like to pitch in about Roguestar and um, other ideology or other shit if I could.
Go ahead.
The thing about Roguestar that a lot of people need to understand is that he does come from a military background. And he's a very passionate individual, for better or for worse. And that's something that is common with a lot of people who are passionate is they'll get too worked up or they'll get way too into it, but at the same time that's kind of what makes them so great. And if you ever want an example of this, and yes, I know I'm chilling, but search for Spells Fired on YouTube and just watch the first video. I mean, this is the first streaming I've ever done ever, and Roguestar is more or less going fucking nuclear on it. I mean, that's who he is. He's a very outspoken individual, and with the whole operation names and shit, we all need to realize that this started from image boards such as 4chan and with sites like Reddit, and there's a certain degree of juvenile naming schemes that we use. It doesn't dilute the meaning of the movement itself, but for example, the IRC chat is called Burgers and Fries, and we use all these silly operation names and shit like that. Operation Disrespectful Nod, that was because of the hilarious statement that one gentleman made towards literally who near the beginning of the conspiracy, and we just go with it because they are funny to us, but at the same time we very much believe in the movements and trying to accomplish the goal. So
Well,
try and keep this in mind.
we just apparently lost Lo for some reason.
He was silenced. They didn't like what he's saying.
No, Lo, come back. Oh, he's back. Welcome back.
Yep. Welcome back, Loping.
That
And
was
yeah,
closing the
Roguestar.
wrong tab.
It's okay. I mean, Roguestar is an individual at the end of the day. He wouldn't. as passionate as gung ho as he is, we can't forget that because he is so. I mean, he's prestigious and he's a voice that a lot of us listen to, but we can't mix that up and believe that he's suddenly trying to represent us. He's still an individual, and that doesn't change regardless of how much prestige that he actually has.
Yeah. And I think one thing that would really help us out as a group is that I think we need to all figure out sort of the tune we want to sing. I suppose is what I'm going to say, because if watching the Gamergate hashtag, there's people posting in it, and most people are posting towards the fact that, hey, we want journalistic reform. But sometimes you see those few people who are, when someone asks, what's this about, they go on this tirade about how social justice warriors are destroying all of gaming and that they have to be stopped, and that if we don't, it's the end of the world, which may or may not be true, because I don't know the future. But ultimately, I think that what I'd like to see is we've got unity in the fact that we are all sort of sticking together, but I think we need to have also unity in the at least the we want journalistic reform, and that's ultimately what we're going for. Because if we win that, if we get honest journalism about gaming without the political ideology, without the pushing agendas and things like that, I feel like it's just going to become a very fair fight, and it'll be the best man will win, the ones with the best ideas will win, and the consumers, us, the gamers, will decide whether or not these people pushing this social justice ideology, whether or not they have whether or not their ideology spreads to the rest of the game, because ultimately they'll try to make games. Then if they can't push it through game journalism, they'll try to make the games, and if the games don't do well, then they're going to either have to evolve and become something different and hopefully better, or they will simply die and fade away.
Well, I need to put this caveat in because I mean it's not necessarily there's in and of itself there's nothing wrong with having an agenda. I mean, all of us in Gamergate, we have our own agenda that we're trying to push as well. It's what we're I feel like what we talk about in reference to the agendas with the social justice narrative in the news outlets is it's when you allow that agenda to slant the news that you're reporting, like to affect the views while at the same time not being transparent about it. Not putting uh, out there that this is what I stand for and this is why I think it is this way. It kind of casts everything that that person says in doubt, like in a negative light, and I think that's kind of what we push against too. I mean, in and of itself, like to have an agenda and in and of itself, to promote, social justice, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just where we will allow it to take us. That could be, and how it's carried out is where we pretty much where we stand. Uh, yeah, that's it. Because we don't want to take it too far. It says, well, we want to wipe out social justice in all shape and form. Well, no, we don't want to do that. It's how we affect where it stands in the industry as is. Who it's going to silence, who it's going to squash out if they don't agree, who it's going to intimidate. If they don't toe the line, that sort of thing.
And I think this kind of brings us full circle back to the fact that when pieces are published generally, or things like that, in the gaming news area about these ideologies and these agendas, instead of allowing people to comment on it and possibly rebuttal it, generally they just shut all of discussion down. And I think that really brings us full circle back to the entire problem. Is it's not so much the fact that these ideologies are out there, because people can have whatever ideologies they want. It's the fact that they're not allowing discussion on it, which really just ticks everyone off.
If you
Yeah,
if you start to question that ideology, or if you start to shed any criticism on it, it automatically lambasts you as a horrible person, and you need to be silenced and go away. That sort of thing. Yeah, that can't stand.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, people are going to have different political views, and that's fine. I mean, that's kind of what makes America great and kind of makes it shitty at the same time. But a lot of these sites, at least for me personally, I understand speaking for myself, I just don't want fucking politics on my gaming websites. This is an entertainment, industry. Why are we focusing on political aspects of it? Even when they, or especially when they don't exist. And what you were saying earlier, Loping, I agree that it's okay to have an ideology. I mean, we're all going to have a different slant and a little bit of bias on it, but we should strive to be as objective as we can whenever we write articles. And at the same time, we can't um, be using it as a literal weapon to basically slander people. Max Temkin, Brad Wardell, shit, I can't remember his name. There was someone else. But people like that are basically having their careers ruined and having their public image completely destroyed. Brad Wardell was talking about how he was getting calls of people saying he's a rapist, and even his children who are going to high school or elementary school were getting questioned about, what does your dad do? Why is your dad a rapist? And shit like that. I mean, that's really fucked up. And at the end of the day, this was just another clickbait article for these sites. This was just another story to run. It ran along the same lines as a review for some fucking game that nobody cares about or the next blockbuster that released at that time. And it's just bullshit.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think what it really comes down to is that gamers have always been sort of the card people have played when they've wanted a victim, and uh, well, not a victim, a an enemy in within the recent years. I mean, it used to be it was the Nazis, then the communists, and now it's the gamers. If you want to, throw someone under the bus, just grab the term gamers or video games and throw it under there. And I think that really is we've at least as someone who started gaming when gaming was generally uncool. Um, I think that we're just tired of being treated that way, as being treated like we're less than people because we play video games and we identify ourselves as people who not only play them but love them and actually pay attention to them.
Yeah, and developers especially who are making games. There was a Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2 who got accused of having this sexist political view by a particular writer, and I think it was Nathan Grayson who went on to talk with Blizzard
It
about Heroes
was
of the
it was
Storm.
it was rapey apparently Castlevania
It's
because
rapey.
it was because Dracula decided to suck a woman's blood out of her neck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's
That was
I
it.
think it was Nathan Grayson who went on to talk with Heroes of the Storm, and in the interview itself, just asked
Oh yeah,
such
where the guy
fucking
stonewalled
loaded
him, right?
questions. Yeah, I mean, I respect Blizzard for fucking doing that. I mean, who the hell would just go into an interview and be like, "So, why is your game sexist?" I mean, I know you invited me to your fucking company headquarters to take a preview at this game and all, and that you're giving me the time of day from your busy schedule to talk to me, but I figure I'd just come by and slander you and then post it later on my site.
Yeah.
I mean, who the fuck would do that? That's unprofessional, and it's
It
just
was the
it's just fucking dumb.
funniest thing. Just reading the dude's responses to those questions was just like, uh huh, yeah, dude, totally, right, whatever. It was just
Yeah, I
like
could
2 pages of
taste
that.
I
Yeah.
could taste the awkwardness in the air just from reading it,
And
and just I don't know.
yeah. Now I'm honestly not a game developer. I have dabbled a little bit in game development, but it ends about where any programming begins. But I'm a writer, so um, I've been watching this stuff actually from a different perspective, more towards the political area, watching the people push the feminist ideology. You have to treat women X, Y, and Z, but if you accidentally do it anyway wrong, then obviously you're some sort of hater. And as writing a book, a fantasy novel, in which I did have a female main character, I realized after a while that I was starting to become very self conscious about how I was writing my characters, which really made me feel terrible because as a writer, I go with building organic characters, so I sort of think of it like Dungeons and Dragons, you build your characters with base attributes and then you throw things at them and see how they react. And that's how I write my characters. So as soon as I started trying, like, getting all of this feminist ideology, well, and trying to be like, well, do I want to have strong female characters and stuff? I realized that I was starting to try to betray my own characters by trying to force them to be people they were not. And I think that's one thing that a lot of these people who push these ideologies, I don't know how many of them actually have written fiction with non-realist, with characters, but I feel like they don't understand the fact that characters in video games and any good art, any really strong characters on their own are their own people. And if you try to force them to conform to a certain thing, it's a disservice to everyone, to your gamers, to yourself, to your writing, everything. It's just a big sham. And I just have to wonder if they even know what they're actually doing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I very much, I write also, so I look at it from the angle of that this is fiction and that these characters they literally can't be sexist. They are incapable of rendering judgment onto the real world. So, I mean, we can look at Samus or whatever when we say she's sexist or whatever, and that she's a poor representation or that she's a terrible woman or whatever. But at the end of the day, whether or not she is even a woman or a fucking human being or portrayed as such is entirely dependent on Nintendo. If they want to just come out and be like, you know what, she has 4 arms, wings, and a penis, we can't do anything about it. That's Nintendo's decision. She is not a separate entity. She is another work of fiction at the whims of her creator. And as such, we can't accuse the content of being sexist. We need to examine that who is actually making it and determine whether they as a company or as an individual is trying to project a certain belief.
Yeah. And I think there's also this sense that there's always some greater force trying to be at work here. Like me with my book, I could probably actually at some point I'm going to be giving a speech at a small game devs conference here in Oregon. But I'm going to be giving a speech, sort of looking at sort of stereotypes and cliches in storytelling. And I mean, my female main character falls into a bunch of different, cliches, but I can also turn around and my main male character falls into a bunch of cliches also. I as a person fall into a lot of cliches, and I have no doubt that people in general, fall into these cliches. The original thought is dead. I mean, everything's a copy of everything else. It's just how much has been copied from one source that really is the argument. So the fact that people are arguing that obviously, you're being sexist or you're being stupid because you're using things that have been used before, I think there's this total disconnect of, well, have you ever actually tried to do it yourself? Have you tried to write a book? Have you tried to make a video game with all of these original ideas and see how it actually turns out? Because I think that if you tried to do it, it would just turn into a giant mess.
Yeah, you can probably infer that what you see from the outlets, what they do is sort of, I guess, like backseat development, you can call it, like just kind of Parthian commentary to try and influence a game or a story to appeal to them, regardless of what the artist's original vision was. And I actually find that like really just kind of gross in general. You have the artist. I'm totally. I need to put this out there. I'm not a games as art person. I totally believe it's a consumer product and blah 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 blah. But at the same time, I need to recognize the people who are making this product. They're going to make it the way that they believe it's going to be, for the best. And if they believe that having their characters or their story or the way they interact with each other to be a certain way would give them more units sold or a better product, then that's totally their prerogative. It's if it's entirely going to be up to the market itself to decide, if this is a good product or not. So, let them decide. Don't try to pop in there and be like, hey, I think your character is not wearing enough clothes, so you need to change that.
Yeah,
That's
honey,
it's
would
a
you put on a
little
coat?
yeah. It's like could you put a bigger hoop skirt on her? That's just a little more, please. It's like no, dude, go away. Just I mean, they like to say this back when we were entitled or whatever. They used to love to parrot the little thing of, well, don't like it, don't buy it. Well, okay. I mean, that works for you too. Don't
Hmm.
like it, don't buy it. That's if it's not appealing to you, if you're obviously not part of their target demographic, cool. Find one that is part of your target demographic.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
that's there's not exactly a lack of variety out there right now. What we're trying to do is promote more variety, make it so that there's something for everybody. If
mhm.
this isn't for you, don't try to make it for you. Go find something for you.
Yep. And I think that what people tend, at least on our opposing side, tend to lack is the fact that video games are a business. Ultimately, they make the products that people buy, which is why there's so many Call of Duties, because people buy them. If people didn't buy Call of Duty, they wouldn't make them anymore. But since people buy them, that's where they go. They follow the money, ultimately. And so you've got these people coming forwards and say, no, don't follow the money, follow the ideology. But the ideology hasn't always, worked. It hasn't always been the most favorite thing of people. Just because you have a good ideology doesn't mean you make a good product. I mean, and I'm actually going. I can lambast this because I'm one of them. But Christian video games. All I need to say is that, and everyone can groan and go, "Oh dear," but they sometimes have great ideology, terrible video games,
Find
and
RTS.
yeah, they're just and and so it's when you look at these, and this has always been my critique, is that ideology is never going to sell a million copies. A great game will sell a million copies. An ideology won't. So unless you're making a great product, then your ideology is worthless because if
Yeah,
five people buy it, you could have just
yeah, that's
sent
part
them
of what
away.
they said like a while ago. I think I forgot if it was uh, what's his name from Nintendo. Oh God, Miyamoto. Miyamoto. If he said it or if somebody else said it, he said a good message inside of a bad game is still a bad game.
Hmm.
So you
Yeah.
start with a good product and work your way from there. If you look, if you want to make a game with social justice is a center to it, or or if you want to make a game all about, uh, oh God, I don't know, just whatever. If you make it a good game, I guarantee you, people will eat it up. Nobody's gonna, you know, shit on a legitimately great game with great everything just because the character, was a. You know what? I actually had this debate with a friend of mine. He said like, well, we don't need games with this, he's actually pretty xenophobic essentially. So he was worried about, you know, he says some pretty borderline racist things every once in a while, and they say, we don't need these games with all these other different people in them. I said, okay, tell me if this doesn't sound like a great game. He goes, okay. He goes, all right. Left for Dead, but cast entirely by sassy black ladies. And then he was like, he had to sit there for like 10 minutes and just I could see him like wrangling with himself inside his mind, like, oh God, this would be so great, but my scruples or whatever. And you start off, just make it a good game, and I guarantee you people will eat it up. You can put whatever message you want as long as it's inside a legitimately good game.
Hmm.
That's kind of what happened with oh, Remember Me, I think. Like, it was a game that catered really especially to this to that demographic, and nobody bought it because it wasn't that great of a game. I mean, even the people who wanted to promote this narrative and say we want more games made like this, they didn't buy it because it wasn't a great game.
Hmm.
And there you go.
Yep. And I think that if the people who want to push this narrative, this bigger social justice thing, I think, as with a lot of things, they are very free and welcome to start their own game dev things and to go through the process like everyone else. We don't guarantee results, but at least give them they get a fair chance just like everyone else. And I think that's all we can really do as gamers, as anyone actually, as anyone in this world. All we can ask for and all we can hope to give is a fair chance, and then everything else has to stand on its own two legs. And I think that's the ultimately the only way that they can really win this is if they actually decide to try and do things on their own.
We say they, you mean other developers?
They meaning anyone with, I suppose, an ideological push or anything. Just if anyone wants to do something, I think all they're entitled to is a fair shot, based upon what they can gain themselves or get other people to give them. And just everyone deserves a fair shot. No string pulling, no lobbying to get special treatment, nothing. Just all they deserve and all they should ask for is a fair shot. People come in with an open mind, play their game. If it sucks, it sucks. If it doesn't suck and it's great, it's great. And I think that's ultimately what we as people should be striving for. Is
Yeah,
just a world like that.
it's pretty
Yeah.
fair. I mean, that's kind of what we fight for too, is to make sure that everybody gets that fair shot, that fair shake, and you know essentially the games stand on their own merits and not because I think what people kind of worry about is maybe I suppose games that in a sense aren't really that fantastic are being promoted and advertised just because they promote a certain narrative. Meanwhile, you've got legitimately good games that get cast aside or ignored just because they don't promote a certain narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really really just what the kind of distasteful behavior that we're trying to just speak out against or call attention to, that we really just want to get out there. I'm sure that for every like depression quest there's probably 20 other independent games that nobody's ever going to hear about.
Mm-hmm.
Just because there's no message behind it. It's just a game for the sake of being a game, and it's fun, and it's what the designer wanted to make.
Yeah.
And you're never going to play it probably because you don't even know it exists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there's just so many games coming out. I mean, it's not necessarily the fault
Flooded.
of someone having a certain ideology and being like, all right, well, I'm not going to look at this game. I mean, there are blacklists and shit, I'm sure, but there's so many independent games. I mean, just look at Steam. Just look at the Steam Greenlight program and how they're basically having to change shit around just because of how, cluttered and how packed it's become.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things because it used to be, you'd get a few games every year, and then now we're suddenly within the I'd say the last 5 or 6 years, just games everywhere. Everyone can make a game. I mean, I did the La Dame Dare here just when it last happened. I made a game, and there were thousands of games made for that. So, and those might have been 48 to 72 hours. But just imagine, you know, the amount churning out. There's a lot of games out there, and I think that yeah, the press, the news, there's not tons of them. There's not millions of Kotakus, or at least people who work at Kotaku, and so much space they can put things in. But ultimately, I think that when it comes down to it, that they should be fair. They shouldn't just go with their friends. They shouldn't go with people they know. They shouldn't promote things. They should promote things based upon their own merits. And I think that's ultimately what we want because then we get the really great games get good press, and the really bad games don't get good press, and the in between games ultimately will probably be presented through places like YouTube and word of mouth, which we've seen recently with games that haven't been generally promoted through journalism.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, the objectively best, if such a thing can exist, games would rise to the top and get the proper coverage, and then uh, the less fantastic games would remain unmentioned. and it's rough that that obviously isn't what is happening now, and that's a big reason why Gamergate is around. I'm gonna assume that I sounded crazy there or something.
Nah.
Oh yeah, totally.
Totally crazy? What the hell's going on?
No, I thought you were absolutely reasonable. I don't know where Lowe's going. He's just fallen off the cliff.
No, I'm just making funny. I know you're fine. It's well within reason. It's just harrowing, because like you said, the current market environment that you're looking at for games right now, it's absolutely inundated, like totally flooded. So it's gonna take a lot because right now, as it stands, I mean, we've never before had an environment like this where the ease of access and the ease of putting your game out there on the market has ever been this low. The bar has been this low because before it had to be, well, you had to code in a specific language, and you had to go through a distributor and a publisher, and then after that, if they greenlight your game, they'll put it out for a trial period or limited. And now you can just be like, well, here's a download link to my mega link to my game, and please play it. And then you have all these tools like Unity and you've got RPG Maker even, and you've got all these, just everything at your disposal to make your own game. So everybody can essentially make their own game. The barrier to entry isn't there anymore. So as a result, we've got all these games coming out, and as a result of that, you've got a market that's totally flooded with it. So a feature piece on some place like rock paper shotgun is going to mean the difference between living and dying for some of these developers. I mean, it's going to be something akin to is this the game that I'm going to be paying my rent with for the next month, or am I going to die homeless and starving because it didn't make it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where we are right now. I mean, it's not a joke. It's not just for independent developers either. With the AAA studios, they're just one bad game away from bankruptcy. With the way that marketing budgets and budgets in general just go, it's not limited to just indies. It's pretty much all across the board. So, I'm not saying that I have any answers to these, because goodness no, that's a huge problem. I don't know how to
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
even know how to begin to address that.
none of us are saying we have the answers for sure, but keep going.
But these are definitely, these are the issues at hand, and these outlets need to recognize they do have a certain level of, I don't know, responsibility or influence or whatever it is that shows that what they have to give back to the community at large. I don't know if they're living up to that. Just because you're gonna have a lot of games that live or die, or actually die because due to no notoriety whatsoever, because supposedly they didn't toe a certain line, and that's where it all comes down to.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of ridiculous. And I think that in general, we need to be harsher in some respects, because at least me as a person, when you start to think of, well, if you don't try and help all these people, some of them could lose their jobs, and or like with the boycotts and things we're doing, well, these people can lose their jobs, but ultimately, isn't that how the world ultimately works? Is that if you put out a good product and you're honest and you do what's right, ultimately we will try and treat you right back as consumers. But if you if you treat us like dirt, especially if we're your consumer, if you treat us like dirt, then we should honestly go away from you. And let's face it, it's not like these guys like Gamasutra and Kotaku and Polygon, all these. It's not like they're Comcast, where they're the only people in some areas that you can get. You can get no one else, so you're kind of stuck with them unless you get some really terrible internet connection or something like that. And so I mean, there's Niche Gamer, there's Spells Fired, which is coming, there's Uloping, there's lots of other alternatives, and I think that honestly, as consumers, we get to choose where our money. I'm doing that in quotation marks because it's more clicks is how they make money. But we get to choose where we go with what we've got, and our time on the internet, where we get to spend it. And if they're going to treat us like dirt, then we should honestly not only inform the people who are the other people, their advertisers that they're getting money from, that who we're still their consumers of, that we don't like it, um, but also we should inform these sites. And I have no doubt if Gamma Sutra and everyone, if they fixed all of their problems and said, hey guys, we're shutting down for a week, we're getting rid of all of the people who've caused these issues, we've talked to them, these are the things that we're doing, these are our new ethical standards, here's how we're doing things, and they opened up, I think that most of us would be a bit wary, but willing to work with them and end it. But the problem is that there's got to be a bridge at some point. We've got to we have reasonable things that we're asking for, and they have reasonable wants. I mean, Gamma Sutra wants to exist. They probably don't all want to lose their jobs and not
It's unreasonable now these days.
not get fired or and stuff like that. But ultimately, we both have things we want. You know, we want ethical journalism. They want to keep their jobs. So I think that we need to work together and just say, hey guys, you know, we don't want you to lose all of you to lose your jobs, but I think for the best thing is that you guys have to change to fit us because we're not going to change to follow you.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the other part of it. I mean, this is essentially us as consumers and as patrons in general exercising our rights. I mean, they like to claim that it's censorship in a sort of way. I mean, no. I mean, this is us enacting that, once again, that, don't like it, don't buy it thing. I mean, it's like, we don't like what you're saying. We're not gonna frequent your site anymore. And not only that, we're gonna tell as many other people as we can, the things that you've been saying, and encourage them not to go, and tell your advertisers, hey, the demographic that you're trying to advertise to, they're not going to be going to these sites anymore, so maybe you should be considering some alternatives. So again, this is us going, don't like it, don't buy it, and oh boy are they mad. I mean, it's not censorship, it's consumer activism. We're not silencing a site. I mean,
Hmm?
there was another little thing that they were trying to promote a while ago. I forgot what the issue was, but the buzzword or buzz phrase that was coming out of the outlets was something along the lines of freedom of speech does not mean, freedom from consequence. Well, it's a two-way street. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom from criticism and freedom from consequence. You've pooped on, your demographic. They're
Hmm.
not going to be coming back to you anymore. We have no reason to go there. The people that you're advertising on your site, who they're trying to target, we need to tell them they're not going to be there anymore, so your site's going to be essentially a money sink. So that's
yeah.
everything right there in a nutshell.
Hmm.
And the future is in YouTubers.
Yeah.
To any developer listening, you need to start going out there and looking towards YouTubers. They're a lot more streamlined. They're way easier to deal with because in most cases you're dealing with an individual as opposed to a company. They're a lot cheaper. You don't need to physically go somewhere or pick up the phone to call someone. I mean, Skype is readily available to talk to a lot of these streamers. And at the same time, you need to be a bit realistic with who you're trying to get. Someone like Total Biscuit, his schedule's probably filled up, but there's plenty of YouTubers out there, and you can turn this into a win-win situation. I mean, yeah, that's kind of suggesting collusion, but there are people who want more publicity, and you need publicity as well, and you can help each other out. And the point is to not let it get completely corrupt with money, and to not have opinions be completely changed just because someone did someone else a favor. You need to be able to stand up and be mature and be like, look, I know you helped me out, but this game's kind of shitty.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, do we want to wrap this up or no?
Like 1 hour, that's like a nice round figure in case people want to watch it after the fact.
Yep. So we can definitely get together again. So, but it was nice talking with both of you. Feel free to plug yourselves at this time.
Well, I'm Loping. Look for the panda. That's me. Gaming and Pandas, and that's pretty much it. I'm just walking amongst you, being nice, telling you to say nice things. That's it.
Yeah, Panda has. I've seen Panda multiple times on the image boards as being based Panda. But no, thank you again to both of you for giving me the time to speak, and thank you again to the listeners for tuning in. I'm Shillfish. I'm with spellsfire.com. It's a community-driven website where anyone can write and anyone can be featured on the front page. It doesn't matter if you want to write about tier lists. Doesn't matter if you want to write a combo guide for a certain character. If you want to review a game or do a preview, it doesn't matter if you're a streamer. As long as it's related to video games, you're more than welcome to not only write for us, and basically with as little barriers as possible, you're also able to cross-post your own blog or your own website or your own Twitch channel, and we're completely okay with that. If you want to use our platform to promote yourself, that's cool. We encourage it. We're here to support you doing that. We want to see as many people in the gaming scene succeed, because at the end of the day, we're all gamers. The site's not out yet, but you can look forward to it. But until then, just follow me at SpellsFired, all one word, on Twitter.
All right, and of course, as always, I am Oath Alliance. This is the Oathcast, and we will hopefully do this again sometime here. Anyways, until then, everyone, stay safe, be civil, and stay strong and game on.